All right, Mason says, in essence, the remix is a creative mental process. It requires you to do nothing more than change the way you look at something. Yeah. The more you start to think in remixing terms, like the more you start to look at things as your clay. You know, for me, like with like a beat making, sampling, like scratch DJ, filmmaking mentality, like I'm always looking at stuff as like raw clay, like other people's content, art, anything as like movies as like something that I can take and I can mold into my own shit. And so it just really requires you to develop that sort of sense of like not looking at art or innovations as like an end, right? They're just means, you know, to some other type of mean, you know, or end or whatever you want to think about it. And it's just a matter of perception. Remixing is a matter of perception. And he talks about, you know, a couple things, you know, specifically how remixing can add amazing value to stuff, but it can also be crap. And we're not talking about crap like in terms of like crappy videos done by 12-year-olds in New Zealand. We're talking about like boring Hollywood reboots and franchises and sequels and, you know, record labels and music companies and video game companies who are risk aversive and they want to release, you know, stuff that's friendly, consumer friendly, right? There's a built-in marketplace versus trying to create a new buzz around a new movie, a new franchise, a new recording artist, etc., which is harder. So you know, we saw that in the first day of class, and not even fully expounded upon. But just look at the fact that we get just a new Star Wars every 6 months, like that aren't really that good, you know. That's kind of like a devaluing of the remix, you know, in so many ways. A remix that devalues the original work, you know. New Karate Kid that came out 10 years ago, stuff like that, you know. Maybe the new Ghostbusters, or the newer Ghostbusters, you know. Anyway, so he suggests too that like remixing can be kind of lame, and it usually happens at the corporate level because they're lazy in some ways, but also, you know, are risk aversive, right? Like don't want to make that investment, you know, into something that may not hit in the marketplace. You know, people are going to come out and watch friggin' Star Wars every 6 months. The remix has evolved on one level into a bland mainstream franchise, which I was just talking about. But if you apply the science behind the remix properly, it is possible to create a remix so good that people forget about the original. Damn straight. I mean, I think you can look at so many examples of this in popular culture where things that have been remixed, you know, it really just makes you just sort of loose sense of the original, like the original doesn't matter anymore, and I think that's fine too. Like I think we as people hold on to some things like movies and music, like we hold on to that stuff for nostalgic purposes or for whatever purposes. We're not willing to let go of things, you know. But it's kind of important to like let go of the past in some ways. And that could mean just making something new out of the past, you know. And so I think he talks about the science in quite a bit in this book. So he leaves us with some examples. So he talks about Machinima. If you're familiar, watch a little clip here from Red vs. Blue. And Machinima is basically this, which Red vs. Blue is one of probably the first and most popular at its time version of this. But basically what you do is you take video gameplay and you create alternative narratives out of it. You give the characters dialogue, you create storylines that have usually nothing to do with what you're watching in the context of the game. These are obviously fair use, you know, fan culture things, but he talks about this as an example where, you know, remixing creates new value. It creates, you know, as Larry Lessig said, you know, education and creates community. and community around these forms of remixing. So we'll watch this little clip from Red vs. Blue. This, I believe, is the first episode, and we'll just watch like the first 30 seconds.
Hey, yeah? You ever wonder why we're here? It's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it? Why are we here? I mean, are we the product of some cosmic coincidence, or is there really a God watching everything, you know, with a plan for us and stuff? I don't know, man, but it keeps me up at night. What? I mean, why are we out here, in this canyon? Oh, yeah. What all this stuff about God? Nothing. You want to talk about it? No. You sure? Yeah.
So you get the sense there. He also talks about video game modding, and video game modding can happen on two levels. Number one, modification of the game play in stories within the game, or modifying the hardware to do different things. But specifically, we mostly see it with like pro-am gamers who are really into the game, really into gaming, but also know code, and they write their own code. They write new storylines, new characters. They write new things into the narrative of games, into the gameplay. And the pretty interesting part about this is often things that, you know, were not on the radar initially of the game coders, the game makers, the game publishers. It's pretty interesting in this sense. I mean, there's a huge subculture based around this, around video game modding, but also you also have like lots of these modders who eventually go and work for the video game companies. They get hired by them because of what they do through their modifications. Or you also have video game companies that then incorporate these innovations of these pro users into their games anyways, regardless of hiring them. They just use their stuff. And he also talks about fashion design, and we'll talk more about this the last week of the term, but in fashion there is no copyright. So fashion designers freely copy from one another. And we're talking about the high fashion runway design stuff, you know, like is fully out there to be copied. So he gives an example though of Bape, Bathing Ape, which is a boutique Japanese clothing designer. They primarily focus on sneakers and like t-shirts and shirts. It's like, you know, $150, $100 shirts, sort of on that supreme exclusivity type thing. But Bathing Ape, Bape started out making sneakers, and a lot of their sneakers look just like the Nike Air Force Ones, except for they had a star design instead of a swoosh. Now, they started making all their own colorways and doing these like really interesting color patterns and all this stuff. And Nike eventually caught wind. You know, probably could have tried to scare them, tried to sue them, tried to do something, but because there's no copyright on clothing, because they have these items have utility value, you can't copyright them. You can't copyright a t-shirt or anything. Nike, instead of trying to like do normally what Nike does, which is, you know, in that Disneyland of suing, they actually collaborated with Bape. And so they started to have some of the Bape designers design colorways for Nike, and they started to collaborate and build a little bit more. So again, just to highlight, you know, how remixing can just be so important, not only to just culture, but to corporations that enjoy the fruits of the remixer's labor. A couple things with, you know, video too, and he gets into this, is vidding. And I'm not going to show any clips of this, but you can click on the links on the slide. Vidding is basically taking, you know, clips from a movie or from multiple movies if it's a franchise, and cutting them together and then editing them to a song. And so you create like your own music video, and the idea is to like explore the characters like in a different way, their relationships in a different way, to explore the narrative in a different way as told through music video and by editing in the process. There's a pretty large subculture built around this, and the subculture also has like a hierarchy, you know, of like, you know, people who are high in the subculture because of what they do, and you know, so it's a pretty interesting example of remixing that's pretty powerful. It's a, you know, it's a like definitely use consumers of these corporate, you know, media products who then go on to you know, vid. And create new meaning around that content. He also talks about animated music videos, which Larry Lessig talked about, and you can click on some of the links and see this, but this is kind of the same thing as vidding, except for the concept is you make a music video, but instead of using clips from films, per se, you use Japanese anime clips. And so again, it's a lot of the same concepts where you explore narratives, characters, etc., via editing to a music track. Lastly, I'll show you Sweding. So watch a little clip, which you can see when you watch this. You can see the Star Wars, The Force Awakens trailer next to the Sweded version. If you've seen the film with Jack Black and Mos Def, aka Yassine Bey, or Yassine Bey, aka Mos Def, they have a whole movie that's called Be Kind, Please Rewind, where basically they erase all of the content with a magnet on all these VHS tapes at a community video rental store. And so they erase, like, you know, all the Ghostbusters and Star Wars and all that, Godzilla, from the tapes, and then threatens to put the rental store out of business. And so what Mos Def and Jack Black and people do in the film is they Swede the movies, which is they do their own low-end, super low-budget bootleg versions of Star Wars or Godzilla, etc. And what ends up happening is the community loves the Sweded versions more than the original versions, and the store blows up. And then at the end, you have the copyright attorney that comes in and shuts them down, and they have to bulldoze over all of them and stuff like that. But I just want to show you Sweding, and you can watch this quick, you know, kind of funny Sweded version of the Force Awakens trailer. And then, yeah, after that, we'll come back and we'll chat for a minute and set you up for Rip a Remix Manifesto.
Who are you?
I'm no one.
I was raised to do one thing. I've got nothing to fight for.
Nothing will stand in our way. I will finish La